Hello, welcome everyone to Red Planet Live. I am your host, Ashton Zeth. I am elated to be hosting the Mars Society's podcast and leading the conversation about human exploration of the universe and the future settlement of Mars. Now, as a longtime space enthusiast, I'm passionate about STEM education and making humanity an interplanetary species. So, thank you everyone for joining today and supporting Red Planet Live. Now, for today, it's always a special occasion when we have our founder, Dr. Robert Zubrin, on the podcast, and today is no exception. So, with today's conversation, we're going to have a couple guests, including Dr. Robert Zubrin. So, as you already know, in addition to being the Mars Society's fearless leader, Dr. Zubrin is also president of Pioneer Astronautics, formerly a staff engineer at Lockheed Martin Astronautics in Denver. He holds a master's degree in aeronautics and astronautics and a PhD in nuclear energy from the University of Washington. Zubrin has authored many books. You might be able to see, there we go, one or two of them over there, including A Case for Mars, and is best known for his advocacy of the manned exploration of Mars. He was the driving force behind Mars Direct, a proposal intended to produce significant reductions in the cost and complexity of such a mission to Mars. I'm disappointed with the lack of interest from government and exploration. Zubrin established the Mars Society in 1998, which works to educate the public, the media, and the government on the benefits of exploring Mars and creating a permanent human presence on the red planet. Let's welcome in Dr. Robert Zubrin.
Thanks for inviting me.
Excited to chat with you again. We did this a year ago when we were announcing MTI, so it's cool that we're doing this again a year later, and we're talking about a new initiative.
Okay, well, thanks. By the way, I do want to correct one thing you said.
Oh, yes, please do.
I founded Pioneer Astronautics and ran it for 27 years until I sold it last year, but I'm no longer with Pioneer Astronautics. I'm focused on the Mars Society now.
All right. Okay. Former president, I need to update that note there. Thank you for adding that tidbit in there. In addition to Robert, we have another familiar face. Alan Boyle is an award-winning science writer, space reporter, and contributing editor at GeekWire. Alan is also the mastermind behind Cosmic Log, former science editor at MSNBC, story writer for Universe Today, and the author of The Case for Pluto, How a Little Planet Made a Big Difference. Hi, Alan. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me aboard. I think I was here for the MTI announcement as well.
I know. I think we're having a little deja vu. I think it was September last year that we did this, and excited that we're all together again to continue the conversation.
You bet.
Well, we're excited. So as I mentioned, and Alan, you just alluded to the MTI announcement, there's a new initiative happening within the Mars Society. So excited that we're going to be covering that today. So Alan, now at this point, I'm going to hand it over to you and you guys can chat directly. And I think there's some questions that you may have for Dr. Zubrin.
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much, Ashton. And I guess the big question is, what's up? And we heard about this at the Mars Society conference in Seattle, that you've got a new initiative and you're getting into the policy sphere. And so what's going on? Tell us all about it.
Well, what we have is we have a draft bill that after some prefatory material, whereas Mars is critical for the search for life on Mars, whereas the technology is now in hand to make humans to Mars possible, and whereas it'd be tremendous for STEM education if we had a humans to Mars program, and whereas the United States is being challenged geostrategically now by an autocratic alliance that asserts that autocracy, not democracy, is the human future, there is a necessity to set that straight, as there was in the 60s. Okay, and so forth. It says, be it resolved that the U.S. Congress requires the National Aeronautics and Space Administration to draw up for its consideration within 6 months a plan to enable a sustained and effective program of human Mars exploration, with the first unpiloted landing of the required heavy payload delivery system occurring no later than 8 years from program start, and the first human landing on the red planet accomplished within a decade. So this bill does not require Congress to draw up the funds. It requires NASA to show them the menu.
Gotcha. Yeah. So I know that SpaceX is already talking about trying to do this. It's going to be kind of an interesting. It kind of reminds me of the human genome, where you've got the public and you've got the private initiative. I don't know if you remember that race between Craig
Certainly.
Venter and Francis Collins. But maybe you could tell me a little bit about how you envision this unfolding. I know you don't want to get ahead of Congress and NASA, but you always have a plan. So what's your vision?
Well, the thing is this. Yes, SpaceX has developed what looks like it's going to be a very good transportation system that could enable humans to Mars. But there's more things than that is required to send humans to Mars and conduct effective exploration on Mars. There's a large number of surface systems, the habitats, the mobility systems, the power systems. And this is really important because SpaceX has embraced the concept that I laid out in my Mars Direct Plan and in the case for Mars back in the 90s, which is that we're going to greatly simplify this mission by making our return propellant on Mars. And in fact, they've chosen the exact same propellant that I recommended, which is a combination of methane and oxygen, which can be readily manufactured on Mars out of Martian CO2 and hydrogen. But it takes power, okay? And reliable power on the surface of Mars is nuclear power. And a space nuclear reactor requires highly enriched uranium, which is not really something that SpaceX is likely to get its hands on. So this is going to need to be a public-private partnership. And so, but the point is that Musk and his team have accomplished the largest single part of this, which is the transportation system. They are making humans to Mars an eminently practical proposition, provided the government joins with them, that we partner with them. And so we're asking, we're going to have NASA put the question, have Congress put the question to NASA to say, look, we think there could be humans on Mars within a decade. Show us your plan on how that could be accomplished. And if NASA comes back with a good plan, great. Okay, if they come back with a plan that is excessively complex or expensive because they choose not, for example, to use Starship, but a much more expensive system like SLS, then it becomes open to discussion. Say, hey, okay, this part's right, but we could have made this a lot cheaper by doing it this way. Okay, we can open the discussion up. And in fact, right now, there is going to be an answer, okay, which is within frankly, by putting the SpaceX capability together with NASA budgeted at about the level it currently is. It's not going to take $100 billion extra dollars a year or something for NASA to do this. Okay, it's there, and so we want to force this out into the open. And look, we could take this from any number of points of view. Okay, the NASA Mars science program right now is in confusion. The sample return mission has run aground because they have an excessively complex mission design which does not recognize current or imminent capabilities, like, for example, Starship. Okay, using Starship, not only could we land vehicles on Mars capable of direct return to Earth, either smaller ones or Starship itself, but we could land an entire robotic expedition to gather the samples, to film the area, to, and deploy platoons of rovers and capable helicopters that can gather samples from hundreds of kilometers away. All this, we could have a real sample return mission, if we took advantage of this. And that, by the way, a mission like that might be a good first way to land a Starship on Mars. That is not with people, but with a large-scale robotic expedition. And that would return a huge amount of science, but also prove the capability of the Starship. Now, at least as a landing, heavy payload landing system. So there's the science thing that is not being addressed. There is having an inspirational science space program that could inspire a tremendous new generation of scientists and engineers. It's not being done. The Artemis program has no meaningful science goals, and unlike Apollo, I mean, Apollo was a moon program too, but it was different because it was being done in the 1960s and early 70s. And by sending people to the moon at that time, we could astonish the world with what free people could do. And we could, you know, basically make it clear that we and not the Soviets were the human future, that freedom was the future. We accomplished that with Apollo. Repeating the same thing, it'd be like, Kennedy in 1961 had said, I'm hoping within a decade we can repeat the Lindbergh flight. um, that's what we're doing here. So I'm not against going to the moon, but going to the moon does not answer the mail here. Okay, we have a geostrategic crisis right now where the free world, led by the United States, is being challenged for global leadership by an axis of tyrannies led by China, emphatically including Russia, who claim that they are the future, that we've gone soft, that we don't have the stuff anymore. And we got to set that record straight. And the only thing in this day and age that can do that is humans to Mars. And so we think that this can be done. We think that by insisting, when Kennedy said we want to be on the moon by the end of this decade, he was taking NASA way outside of its comfort zone. That didn't come from them. Okay. They're there. They hadn't even launched a man into orbit yet when Kennedy made that speech. We didn't even know if people could eat in space. Kennedy said, I want to have a man on the moon and return him to Earth before this decade is out. Well, NASA needs to be taken out of its comfort zone. And I believe that if it is, it will perform. Right now, NASA is being victimized by the bigotry of low expectations. That's what is going on. There are people in NASA. There are plenty of good people in NASA, people who joined NASA because they wanted to do in their generation what the Apollo engineers had done in theirs. Okay, they didn't go there just to, have a job and be able to buy groceries or something. There are some people in NASA who are in the latter category, but the way you shake this thing out is by putting it to the test. And then you have the people who can really do stuff rise to the top.
Well, I've got a couple of thoughts stimulated by this. One is I see the questions are already coming in, and I'm glad to see that. I think that it's a case here of preaching to the choir because, the Mars Society is already on board with this, I'm sure, but the choir has to sing. And so how do you plan to get this? Do you have advocates in Congress who are going to be helping you out on this? Or do you intend to do like a March storm, a lobbying effort? How do you get the word out?
Well, we may well do a March storm type effort, but the beginning of this effort and the foundation of it is going to be having Mars Society members and other space advocates and ordinary citizens going to meet with their congressmen in their home offices, okay, and put this draft bill, which everybody can download from the Mars Society website, it's posted there, and meet with them and ask them to become a co-sponsor. So we want to meet with the people in their district. And this has just begun. I don't know actually yet what's going on nationwide. We just began this week, but for instance, this week, we here in Colorado, we met with aides to two of the congressmen from Colorado, and we have a discussion about setting up a meeting with the third. And this is going on nationwide. And now, look, we're at the height of the election and the congressional season is going to end. So we do not anticipate getting this introduced, let alone passed, during this congressional session. But, the re-election rate to Congress is like 95%, and which is another problem, actually. But has to do with gerrymandering and so forth. Everybody is sitting in a safe district, or most of them are. But nevertheless, it does pose a certain advantage in that we can meet with them now and have fair confidence that the people we're meeting are going to be there in January and February and so forth. So we're starting the campaign now, holding these meetings. We're looking for congressmen and senators who are willing to become champions of this, because they're like the rest of us. You know, this the space program we have not now is not the space program that we think we should have, and it isn't the space program that we should have. It is not a space program worthy of a nation of pioneers, and we need to insist that we have that. And so we are basically, NASA is the government agency that has this responsibility. We're going to say to them, show us your best plan, NASA. And then they can show a plan, and then that will become open to discussion, criticism, improvement. Okay, but right now there is no discussion. There is no plan. NASA talks about we're going to send humans to Mars someday, but there's no plan. They're not even wrong, as Richard Feynman once said about somebody. We got to see the plan and then improve the plan and then do the plan.
Mm-hmm. And it seems to me that an important part of this is really to make it a bipartisan effort. As you remember, there are multiple grand visions that have come up over the years. The Constellation program that George W. Bush thought he would get going to get us to Mars by 2020, something like that. And that was put to the wayside, and then Barack Obama came up with the Astronoid initiative, and that was put by the wayside. And I guess if Artemis has any success, it's because people stuck with the program. That Artemis really, Jim Bridenstine got that started under the Trump administration, and the Biden administration didn't mess with it. They continued down that road, and it seems to me that's what you have to do, is to try to have something that can survive a change of administrations from one to the other.
I agree, and that is why we want this to come from Congress, okay? Because whoever is elected president is going to be very controversial. Whereas if this comes from Congress and it comes from a bipartisan group in Congress, and then the president responds to that and says, and yes, I will do that, then this isn't a Trump thing or a Harris thing, then this is an American thing. And that's what we need to have.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But then you do need to have someone who can be the person issuing the clarion call, as JFK did back with the Rice University speech, and we choose to go to the moon. Do you feel like there has to be a we choose to go to Mars moment?
Well, probably yes, at some point, but that needs to be prepared. And as I said, the way we're going to do this is from the bottom up, or if you will, from the middle up. Kennedy had a mystique that neither Harris nor Trump has, but so it could, in his day, come from him in the way that it did. But actually, there was a lot of spade work done before that. Von Braun got together with Walt Disney, and they produced movies about how we could go to the moon. They put the idea out there. There were other people circulating it, so that at a certain point, when John F. Kennedy had to respond to the challenge of the Soviets, the challenge in Cuba, and the challenge of the Gagarin flight following on Sputnik, no less, there are other things he could have chosen. He could have chosen a military space program. He could have chosen to send the Marines to invade Cuba instead of leaving it to Cuban exiles. There are other ways he could have responded to the challenge of the Cold War than sending men to the moon. But the idea had been put out there. In this case, people today are much more accustomed to thinking about a human future in space than was the case in 1961. I can tell you that the science fiction section in my local library in 1961 was very small. It was one shelf of books. Now it's large because there is, I mean, I think a substantial fraction, might even be a majority, but it's certainly more than 25%, somewhere between 25 and 60% of Americans believe that it's essential for a positive human future that humanity expand into space. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think people pretty much know that that involves Mars at this point. Um, and we just got to say, look, this is, you know, what NASA is there for. They're not there just to give contracts to aerospace companies, flying people up and down to the space station, or do a moon mission because we want to do something that's a little more interesting than flying up and down to the space station. Um, they're there to open up the solar system. And so this is the challenge that's staring them in the face. And frankly, we are far better prepared today to send people to Mars than we were to send men to the moon in 1961. And we were there 8 years later. And that was a United States that had half the population and 1/4 of the GDP of the United States today. They did it. And if for us to say we can't do it, this is too hard for us, is for us to say we have become less than the people we used to be. And that is something this country cannot afford.
Mm-hmm. It seems to me that you really need to have the strategies organized to do this. I see two tracks. One is the strategy of USA versus the international approach that NASA has tried to kind of promote with the Artemis program. And then the other thing is whether you stress the science. Are we alone in the universe? Is there life on Mars? Is it primarily a scientific endeavor, or is it a settlement endeavor? Should we be putting the pieces in place? I have a feeling which side of that question you would favor, whether it should be purely science or aimed at settlement. But maybe you
Okay.
can talk about trying
Well,
to
first of
address
all,
those strategies.
number one, um, this program should be international and that it should draw in our friends all across the free world. Okay. We need to unite, reaffirm the unity, um, and the greatness of the Western Alliance, um, of the family of nations who believe in human liberty, the family of nations who should put their stamp on the human future as humanity moves out into space. Um, okay, because I mean, to me, I do travel a lot internationally, and I go to Europe, almost any European country. I speak to people there. I go to Ukraine. Okay, I go to South Korea. Okay, I'm speaking to people that share certain fundamental values with us. I'm really speaking to people who I have almost as much in common with as I do with other Americans. And I've been to unfree countries, and that's not really the case. Um, and So there is a larger family of us, the West, who have all this in common, and we should do this together. But it's going to require American leadership because the United States is by far the largest and most capable member of this family of free nations. Okay. Now, the second point that you said, science or settlement.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, I do not see a contradiction between that. Okay. Um, Look, we know the most about the Earth compared to any other planet because we live here. Um, Europeans would not have known very much about America if all they ever did was send exploration missions across the sea. You know, the knowledge of the New World would have been very superficial. It is by settling the earth, because humans actually are not native to the earth, we're native to Kenya. We then went and settled the rest of the earth. And if we had stayed in Kenya, we really wouldn't know a lot about the earth. But the so this process of leading to from exploration through building a base on Mars, through settling Mars, through creating new nations on Mars, and ultimately terraforming Mars. This is a continual process in which each step enables the next. Now, the initial task is exploration. Okay, there is a tremendous amount to be learned here of both theoretical and practical value. Because, for example, we can discover much more about what the possibility of life is. Early Mars and early Earth were twins. Okay, and so they both could have undergone very similar chemical evolution, leading to self-replicating organisms, life. Okay, but while there's a lot of very sound theoretical arguments that would explain why water and carbon should be the basis of life in terms of the kind of complex chemistry they can do and all of that, the idea that DNA and RNA should be the information storage medium is demonstrably untrue, actually, because, in fact, there's a synthetic biologist, Steve Benner in Florida, who has created a new kind of DNA with 6 base pairs instead of 4. And that's just basically adding a couple of letters to the same alphabet. But, the Latin alphabet and the Chinese alphabet don't just differ by a couple of extra letters. They differ completely
Right.
but they're very conceptual foundations. But they both record information. You can write books in both of them. In other words, they both do answer the mail in terms of what the functions of an alphabet need to be, although that you can do very different things with them as well. So we go to Mars, we may find out that there are other types of life that can be created that don't use DNA and RNA, that use a different alphabet, as it were. And we'll find out a lot more about what life really is. And, the biological technology, biotech, is going to be one of the foundational revolutionary engineering fields of the 21st century. Biotech is nanotechnology. That's what it is. Okay, and it's the real nanotechnology. It's self-replicating micro function, micro robots, if you will. And we're now learning to read the code. We're going to be able to write the code. But what if there's different kinds of micro robots that can be created and so forth? Anyway, so this is practical value. Now, but you see, here's the thing. Okay, I like making science a major part of the initial mission goals, because it means you have to have an effective capability on Mars. A Mars exploration program that has a deep scientific purpose will not be satisfied with a flag and footprint mission. Too many NASA mission designs that I have seen involve, well, we go to Mars, we stay for 30 days, and we leave. And you say, well, you're missing the point here. What's the purpose of your mission? Your purpose of the mission is to say you've been to Mars? No. Your purpose of the mission is to explore Mars. So you want long duration missions on Mars. And long duration missions lead to the establishment of a permanent base, and a permanent base leads to settlement. So yeah, I want this program in terms of the one that NASA lays out to Congress to be a purpose-driven program, to be a science-driven program. But a science-driven program will look to create a sustained presence on Mars. And that means long-duration missions to start, establishing bases, learning to turn Martian materials into resources that can greatly amplify our ability to sustain ourselves on Mars, etc. This is what leads you forward towards settlement.
So that's the long-term vision. I wanted to get a little more shorter term, just in terms of coalition building. Have you thought about the ability to kind of enlist partners, whether that might be folks like SpaceX, or whether it might be other space societies, the National Space Society, or other people who could present a united front? How do you come down on that issue?
Well, we're certainly interested in having allies. I think in order to get them, we're going to have to create some initial momentum ourselves. I think that at some point, SpaceX and everybody who supports what SpaceX is doing um, will want to support this. Because look, the reason why Musk established SpaceX was to get humans to Mars. That's it. Okay. It wasn't to do Starlink. Starlink is something that he became able to do because he created reusable launch vehicles. But the reason why he created reusable launch vehicles is to enable the human settlement of Mars, to enable humanity to become multi-planetary. There's lots of things we're going to be able to do with the capabilities that we develop in order to settle Mars. Okay, we're going to be able to feed the world. Okay, yeah. Okay, this is one of the goals of MTI, the Mars Technology Institute, which is to develop the technologies needed to settle Mars. Well, those human Mars expeditions do not require new food technology. Mars explorers can just bring their food. But Mars settlements are going to want to have vastly more efficient ways of growing food than is currently done at scale on Earth. And what are you talking about when you do that? You're talking about ending hunger forever. Okay. And so these people who say, well, you got your head in the cloud, there are human needs on Earth, blah, blah, why are you doing
I think that story was on my list, and that question was on my list.
Yeah, well, they couldn't be more wrong. Okay. It's by developing these technological capabilities that we're going to solve all the problems of the Earth.
Yeah. I'm seeing all these questions rolling by on a column here. And so I think that it might be time for Ashton to come back into the mix. But I do see the first question I'm going to ask is, what is the Mars Society doing to actually get to Mars? Or are you all just talking smack?
Well, what we're doing to actually get to Mars, we're doing a number of things to actually get to Mars. But right at the center of it right here is this. We're going to mobilize our members. And look, if you're listening to this program, you shouldn't be sitting there and saying, well, let me see, I'm going to watch to see what the Mars Society does. You should do it too. Okay, history is not a spectator sport. If you think that something needs to be done to get humans to Mars, you should join us. And I don't mean just taking out a membership card. I'd like you to do that, but that's not the key thing here. No, the key thing is the activity. Okay, the key thing is the action. Okay, join us in this action of getting Congress to demand NASA put a plan on the table, because that's how we're going to get to Mars. They're doing a lot of other things too. Okay, to simulated Mars missions to learn about how best to explore Mars. We're doing technology development. We're doing other stuff. But this right here is on the nose. If you want to say, are we just talking smack, or are we trying to do something? We're trying to do something. This is what we're trying to do. And so join us. Everyone who's watching this show, join us. And, find your local chapter of the Mars Society. And if you can't find your local chapter, contact info@marssociety.org. Send me an email saying, hi, I live in Nashville, Tennessee. I can't find the chapter. What can I do? And they'll tell you what to do, or they'll find our other members that we have in your area and help get you all together so you can do it together. But one way or the other, take action.
You said it best. I love it. Well, I'm hoping to see some membership applications submitted today. We've got some efforts, maybe the ambassador program, those that want to get involved. There is an opportunity here. And so reach out to the Mars Society. We'd be happy to have you and get together behind this initiative. But I do see we've got a ton of questions. So let's try to roll through some of those. I see that we have a question from Doug, who asks, to what extent would long-term NASA funding for commercial LEO, low Earth orbit stations, prevent NASA from funding a human mission to Mars?
It would not be a factor. NASA, look, funding private space stations, and there's about 3 space station efforts that I'm aware of that are mostly private funded with some NASA participation. And it's on the order of a fraction of a percent of NASA's budget is going towards this. But you see, here's the thing. Okay, look, I don't want to put NASA down. There's a lot of stuff that NASA has done here that has set us up to this point. Okay, NASA helped fund SpaceX, for example, um, by giving contracts for launches with the Falcons and by helping to fund the development of the Cargo Dragon and the Crew Dragon. And now they've provided some funds to help develop Starship. Um, Not all the funds, but they've provided a nice chunk. I think 2.9 billion, and Musk is providing the rest. So these capabilities that NASA has developed is now putting us in a position where it's now realistic to think about doing this, and doing it at a very reasonable price. And furthermore, okay, the other entrepreneurial space efforts. I mean, that's one thing that's pointed out in this bill, is that it's not just SpaceX. We now have a large entrepreneurial space sector that can contribute all sorts of technological capabilities to help this thing along. We could have done humans to Mars in 1981. Okay, frankly, NASA had plans for doing so. Okay, it would have been done at much greater cost than it could be done today. But well, here we are. We do have the stuff. So now it's a question of, do we have the will?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. We've got an emergence of this commercial private space sector that, has the time and the funds to bless and help with initiatives like that. So we're hoping to see more of those type of companies partner here. But speaking of budget, you were talking about funding. There's a question from one of our listeners here. Could we move 1% of military budget to Mars and moon exploration in the name of planetary defense?
Well, that's a political question, but 1% of the military budget would be, I don't know, $7 billion or something like that, something in that general range. Certainly that would do a very great deal towards accelerating moon and Mars exploration. And I actually think it would be a good idea from a military standpoint itself. Do you know, this Ukraine war is actually the first space war. The Ukrainians are fighting against 4-to-1 odds, and they're holding their own because of space assets, space-based communications, space-based reconnaissance, space-based precision-guided weapons. This is what is allowing them to hold the line against otherwise overwhelming odds. And it is now clear, based on this experience, that space superiority is going to be the decisive factor in any future military conflict between comparable countries. If the Russians only outnumbered Ukraine 2-to-1, Ukraine would be in Moscow already, because of the space superiority. So this is decisive. So I actually think, just in terms of military priorities, there needs to be a shift towards enhancing space capabilities. And by the way, these are not just military space capabilities, but civil space capabilities. Because, for example, you take the Falcon 9, which was developed as a civil space transportation system, and they've launched thousands of satellites with it now. There are now more SpaceX satellites in orbit around the Earth than all the rest put together. And this represents a tremendous military capability that is civil capabilities. In World War II, the fact that the Americans and British had a tremendous merchant marine, that's what made the naval superiority truly meaningful. That's what allowed us to send armies across the ocean and supply them across the ocean. So the fact that we had maritime capabilities had an enormous bearing on our overall military strength. Similarly, our overall strength in space is going to be determined not just by military space systems themselves, but as it were by the merchant marine, which will be greatly built up by a very energetic space exploration program.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And getting back to the congressional effort here, one of the other questions that we received is, do you have specific talking points on how the Mars mission would relate back to each congressional district?
Well, in certain districts, I do. I'm familiar with my own district, in which there's this company called Lockheed Martin that you may have heard of, as well as dozens of small companies founded, like Pioneer Astronautics was, by veteran engineers from Martin, who then decided and start their own company specializing in some technology area that they individually had strength in. So there's a whole ecosystem, if you will, right here in this district, that with plenty of players, big and small, that would be able to participate very usefully in a Humans to Mars program. Now, district by district across the country, I don't know that, but the people who live in those districts do. And they're probably, if you want to know, it'd be a very rare district in the United States that doesn't have some aerospace company in it, believe it or not.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Speaking of Congress, Mike Helton asks, who are the sponsors in Congress you will target?
We're going after all of them, all Congress representatives and all senators. We want our people in their districts to meet with them. We gotta see who's there and who will respond to the call. And I mean, sure, I'd love to have a Congress person who's on the relevant space committees and so forth. But at this point, we're going wide. We're going to meet with all of them, and try to get the discussion going.
How are you prioritizing? I mean, obviously the call is out to everybody listening, to Mars Society members, to our ambassadors, to go out there and talk to their congressperson. But is there a priority? Like, hey, we're going to target, at least initially, those that have high aerospace companies in the area, or they have a history, like they're in Silicon Valley or somewhere like that. Is there a priority which areas that you're going to target first, and then trickle down, or is it just blanket across? We're going to try to get
first of all, we're just telling people to meet with the congressman in their district. Now, as it happens, we tend to have more Mars Society members in districts that have aerospace companies. Many Mars Society members are aerospace engineers themselves. So our meetings disproportionately will be in the districts where there is a larger amount of aerospace activity. But we don't want to, exclude anyone, because in Congress, a vote's a vote. And we want them all. And look at it. I mean, just think about it. Wherever you live, there obviously is one congressman that you live close to. And for most people, there's at least three. Okay. So what I'm asking everyone to do here is to go meet with those three. I'm not asking people in Colorado to go meet with Congress people in their home offices in Texas. I'm asking them to go meet with the people in their own district and the neighboring districts. Okay. And, in Texas, I believe there's 38 congressional districts in Texas. Okay. So Texas is pretty big. If you live in Houston, you don't need to go visit the ones from the Panhandle. But but there's 3 or 4 that are within driving range of where you live if you live in Houston, and similarly almost anywhere. And so there may be a few people, but even if you live in Alaska, there may be only one congressperson, but there's 2 senators, so meet with those you can reach.
I like it. Okay. And at a high level, for those that are unfamiliar, that are new to this process, how do they get a meeting with their congressperson? What's the best way to go about that? For those that want to get involved, hey, I'm ready. What do I do?
Well, in the old days, you'd call them on the phone. And that's, in some districts, that's still the best thing to do. In others, they have a form, on their website, and they say, fill it out if you'd like to meet with the congressperson. You might want to do the email, but then follow it up with a phone call if you get no response. And if you get no response on the phone call, drop in on the office. and say,
Good
"I
old
want to meet with a
conversation.
legislative aide." But in general, between emails and phone calls, you can get a meeting, at least with an aide, and very frequently with a congressperson. Senators are harder, but they're possible too. Uh, and the and by the way, this is a good time to do it, because even though this is not a good time to actually get legislation introduced into Congress or to get legislation passed, especially of this kind, uh, it's an excellent time to meet with them, because they're going to be, the Congress representatives and senators, in their home districts a lot over the next couple of months. And furthermore, they're going to be more inclined to be nice to their constituents during this period. So this is a time when, uh, to a certain extent, it's actually easier to get a meeting than it is during the main congressional season. Um, but try it now, and if it doesn't work now, then we'll try it later. But here's the thing. Okay, space is not like abortion or gun control, in which there are very firmly defined battle lines, and this congressman is this way on those two issues, and he doesn't want to hear from anybody who has on the other side, because they're just a pain in the ass. They're going to hate him, as he is there and they are on the other side. Period. Done. But space isn't like that. Okay. Space is one of these things where, gee, I guess I can talk to people that aren't going to come to my office and throw rocks at me. And also, who aren't already my supporters, so I don't really need to talk to them. These are people who, and so we have found that people, the Congress people, will meet with you, tell you, we want to talk about having a space program worthy of a nation of pioneers. And in particular, you could describe the bill a little bit, because once again, we're not asking for big money here, not asking for any money, actually. We're asking that NASA show Congress the plan, show them the menu. We're not telling Congress you got to order lobster Cantonese. We're asking Congress to ask NASA, what is lobster Cantonese going to cost me? And so it's not an impossible lift. It's not an impossible lift. So you want to always be polite, even if they are not cooperative. And you certainly want to be polite if they actually give you a meeting. And if they say, well, we'll think about it, don't pound the table and say, don't think about it, do it. No, you gotta work with them on this, make friends with them. Okay, establish a relationship. And by the way, that will be good for you for lots of things you may need done in the future in other ways. Okay. It's good to, and I got to tell you, for those of you who have never done this, it feels good to do it. It really does. Because instead of sitting there being a frustrated spectator of the political process, watching MSNBC or Fox, and everybody is, saying all this stuff, and you're saying, why can't they just do this? Go there and, be part of the ruling class. Okay. That is, be part of the political process. This is what democracy is. It's not just pulling levers or sending in mail-in ballots for people that you never talk to. They're there to represent you. That's why they call it representatives. Okay, that's their job, is to represent you. Their job is to listen to you. Okay, now not all of them do their job. That's quite true, but some of them do, and some of them are quite passionate about doing that job because they believe in this. Okay, because some of them, actually most of them, could actually be making more money, you being high-priced lawyers or something, than doing this Washington thing. Okay, so not all of them, some of them are rats. Okay, some of them are skunks. Okay, some of them are creeps, but a lot of them are people who they wanted to do something more meaningful with their lives than just make a lot of money being a lawyer. And that's why they're there. And if you can go there and talk to them about something grand that they can help make happen, they'll listen.
I gotta say, I'm loving the conversations that are going on in the chat column. So we've got enough questions to fuel a whole bunch of discussion on this, and I hope the discussion continues. I was just going to say, for example, in my state, Washington State, we've got Maria Cantwell, who is in charge of the Science, Space, and Transportation Committee, and also we've got Blue Origin. And Maria Cantwell has been quite a champion for, trying to say, oh, the Washington State space industry is the greatest. Robert, I'm sure you hear that about the Colorado space industry as well. And so just as you say, it's fun to be involved in the political process. It's also fun to learn about who's doing what and who's interested in what. And I think that's a good entree to making a case for your member of Congress that hey, this is good for our state because it boosts our industry and everybody wants to get a piece of that high-tech industry.
Yes, and by the way, I believe Maria Cantwell will be an excellent person to contact, and not just because she's in Washington State. You got Blue Origin and Boeing and lots of other stuff, but actually I've had some contact on other issues with Maria Cantwell's people over the years, and they've been pretty good. So she's an intelligent senator, and you should meet with her. And by the way, this is despite the fact that Jeff Bezos himself never talks about Mars; he always talks about L5 colonies or something. But nevertheless, the fact of the matter is, having a program like this would be very good for Blue and Boeing, and the 100-odd small companies that have been founded by people who used to be engineers at Blue.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Let's see. I see we've got a good question here, and I'm very curious to hear your answer, Robert. How do you see SpaceX's legal dispute with the FAA affecting their Mars mission timelines, and could this challenge push for more supportive space policies or slow progress?
Well, look, we live in the world we live in, and there are regulators, and they're of varied quality, and some of them, can become obstacles, and you basically have to work your way through that process. And I actually don't know in detail the issues between the FAA and SpaceX. Just from what I've heard, it looks a bit overdrawn, but I think SpaceX will be able to prove that. And if they have to wait till November to launch, then November is 6 weeks away. And so there you have it. I mean, I do think it's very important that, and this goes to the Mars Society's work more broadly in terms of spreading the vision. This is the ambassadors and other works that we do in terms of just reaching out to broader audiences and explaining them the value of this. Is we want the space program and the Mars program in particular to have a broad base of public support. So, because nuclear power we were getting orders for 2 nuclear power plants a month in the early 70s, and by the mid 70s, the industry had been painted as a villain, and the regulators stopped it in its tracks, and it's never recovered from that. We want to have a more healthy relationship between the regulatory structure and the space industry than, for instance, the nuclear industry has had. And so it's very important to simply spread the vision here so that people will know this is something that we want to function. And I mean, look, the FAA has been a pretty good regulator of the aviation industry. The FAA has not dedicated itself to stopping commercial aviation in the way that many people in the Nuclear Regulatory Commission have dedicated themselves to trying to stop nuclear power. Okay, no, the FAA has dedicated itself to make sure that commercial aviation, the airlines, conduct their business safely, not to try to get them to stop flying. And we need to have them to have the same attitude towards the growing commercial space industry. And part of that is simply educating people, because the sixth grader in your classroom 10 years from now could be a regulator at the FAA, or could be a congressman or woman, or could be somebody working at an investment bank and is deciding whether or not to make a loan to a space startup. You never know. So, the Mars Society does three things. One is spread the vision. Okay. Second is political initiatives like this. And the third has been our projects like our Mars stations in the desert and the Arctic. And it's easiest to see, okay, the concrete projects, yeah, you can see here's a Mars Desert Research Station, here's a Mars Arctic Station. Wow, look at that. Okay. The next is political successes. And we've had political successes. We helped save the Curiosity rover, which was in danger of cancellation. We helped save other missions that were in danger of cancellation. Okay. Hopefully we'll get this passed, which will be huge. Okay. But in another way, the most effective thing we've done is simply the spreading the vision. It's by our spreading the vision, that's why there is a SpaceX. Okay. Because Elon Musk was recruited to that vision. Okay. Elon Musk read the case for Mars. Elon Musk came to a Mars Society function in the Bay Area in 2001. And he went on from there to start SpaceX. And the people who, nothing can stop an idea whose time has come, provided it has the messengers to spread the vision. So this is why, the ambassador program that you are helping to lead, Jim Melton started, and all of our other activities that help spread the vision are fundamental. So one of the questioners earlier, are you just talking or are you doing something? Well, we're both talking and doing something. And talking is really, really part of doing something. And so let's spread the vision. Let's get the bill passed. Yeah, let's build more stations. Let's do all that stuff. But let's make this happen.
Excellent. I'm ready to see some more ambassador applications come through after this. Well, we've talked a lot about like you said, we've got the Mars Desert Research Station in the Arctic, doing the congressional campaign. Can you give us a quick update on MTI? Where is it now a year from its announcement?
Well, the MTI is doing two things. Okay, we had a fundraiser for the MTI. We raised about $150,000, which is not enough to build, a campus with a whole research institute and all that. That needs more like $150 million. But it is enough to kick off activities in using the MTI as a proactive incubator to launch businesses that will develop technologies to get humans to Mars. And the two that we have settled on, one is in the artificial intelligence area, and the other is in the Mars food area. Okay. And currently we actually have a business plan for a certain venture in artificial intelligence that people will be hearing about, but which I don't want to spill the beans on right now, because I want us to get a head start on any potential competition. But I will say this, that if you are an investor type and you've got money at your disposal, or people who do, and who you think might be interested in investing in a artificial intelligence initiative that relates directly to space exploration in general and Mars settlement in particular, please contact info@marssociety.org. The other thing that we're into is this Mars food issue. And people will be hearing about an initiative that we're launching in that area very shortly. Watch for it.
I love a cliffhanger. That's a great way to wrap up our conversation today. That hour goes by so fast. But I just want to say thank you, Dr. Robert Zubrin, for joining today. Thank you, Alan Boyle, for coming on. It was a great conversation, and I know the conversation and the chat was quite lively. So you can go back and read those if you're interested in hearing what everybody's saying. But thank you both for joining today.
You are most welcome.
Okay. Live long and prosper.
That's right. Wanted to say just one more thing. Thank you to our Executive Director, James Burke, our PR Director, Michael Stoltz, our friends at Liftport, Michael Lane and Leah. And wanted to remind everybody that next month, October 1st, we will be doing a special episode. It's interviews that I did at the Mars Society Convention. Some of the names you might recognize is Brigadier General Dr. Pete Warden, Howard Hugh, the Orion Program Director at NASA. So tune in to that episode next month. And we're going to close out this month's episode like we always